first step when you're doing anything with your valves or you're taking your valve springs off is you want to either pressurize the cylinder or put something in the cylinder, like a rope or something to keep the valves from falling. We're going to be using air pressure. One thing to note about this whole deal is when you get a compression tester, it's going to come with a hose real similar to this, and that hose will have a little valve in the end of it. It's like a Schrader valve to keep the pressure from releasing when you have the engine turning over. You'll have to remove that to use it for this purpose because that's not going to allow the air to flow into the engine. A lot of times too, they don't tell you if you can do this with them, but every one I've ever seen, you can just take like a bike pump valve remover and it just unscrew it like a normal valve. So you take that and you're going to screw it into the spark plug hole. Yeah. The best way to do it is to just find the hole with your hand. I mean, you're not going to be able to get a good angle on it because it's up underneath stuff. But once you get the first little bit of it started, like I just did right there, super easy. If you look at the hose right now, I've got it at a little bit of like a twist, and you just spiral it on there. It's got an O-ring on it, so you don't have to have it like torqued down or anything. Just as tight as you can get it with the hose is more than enough. You'd be surprised how little force you need to get it to seal. So you got this ready to hook up to your air compressor. Okay, so the next thing you're going to want to do is unscrew your rocker arm bolts. I've got them loose already so I can take them off easy. Okay, so with these bolts, they're actually bind nuts, so they're made to bind a little bit. That way they can't just come off. So when you're pulling them off and you're unscrewing them when they're actually tight, it's going to feel almost like it's like cross-threaded or something like that. That's actually normal. Don't be worried about that. But you get those off. And another thing about when you pull off the rocker arms is when you have a stamped steel rocker arm like this, and really even a roller rocker arm, you want to make sure you put them back on the same cylinder they came off at, because the push rod will mate right here to the bottom of the rocker arm. And on the stamped steel rockers, there's also another metal on metal, even though it's got oil in it, place where the trunnion goes inside the stamped steel rocker, and both of those wear to each other, so you don't want to get them separated. You take those off. I have little bags I've been doing to keep track of them. So this is the front one. The way I label it is front and back. Some people will label it exhaust and intake. However you can keep track of them, it really doesn't matter what way you label it. On a small block Chevy and on most engines, they are the same as far as like if you were to have brand new ones, they're going to be the exact same ratio, all that, so you don't have to worry anything about that particular part of it. So right now we're left with the push rods and just the valve springs. With the particular valve spring compressing tool that I have, you have to take the push rods out. I only take one push rod out at a time because you don't have to take both out, and that'll help you keep track of them. Okay, so you get that out. So the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to hook up the air compressor, pressurize the cylinder. Now we're not going to do that right now because the air compressor that I have has a leak at the air compressor itself, and it pretty much runs constantly. So it's super loud, we won't be able to hear anything we're doing. So what we're going to do is hook up air to here. Then we're going to take this tool right here. This is our valve spring compressor. It's just you'll see how it works. It's pretty simple. You can get ones that are even cheaper than this one. I just like it because it's a little bit easier to use. That's just me personally. So you take this and you screw it on here. Make sure you don't like cross-thread it or anything. When you first get this tool too, the threads in it are going to be cut kind of crappy, to be honest. But if you put it on there once or twice, it'll clean the threads up. You might even, I mean, if you're really anal about it, you might want to put like a tap through it or a thread chaser, but that's not going to hurt anything. This is a really soft metal, so by screwing it on, you're not going to mess up the studs anyway, in any way. So you get it screwed on there. Okay, so we got it on there. And what we're going to do, when we get the air put in the cylinder, is we're going to turn this to the side, leave it like that, and we're going to grab something with some rubber to it, or a wood or something like that, and then another rubber mallet. And so when there's air in the cylinder, you're going to want to take whatever it is that you're using to touch the valve retainer with, that needs to be softer than the valve retainer, and you're going to want to hit it with that hammer. And hear that noise it makes right there, that like clicking noise almost? When you put air into it, at first it will not make that clicking noise. What that's gonna mean is that the little retainers are stuck to the valve spring retainer, the little small retainers deep right in the middle there. And so if you try to open the valve when those are still stuck, or open to compress the spring while those are still stuck, it's going to open the valve, and then all your air pressure is going to let out and you're going to drop your valve, and that's not good. So go ahead and break those loose once you have air on it. The only reason we're not doing that right now is because you won't be able to hear me say this with the air compressor on. But after you've broke those loose and made sure they're broke loose, you can put this little arm on here to make it easier to push down. Other ones use like a screw-in type. This one just has like a lever basically. So you're going to put this on here, make sure it's centered as best as you can get it. You're going to push this, it's going to compress that spring, and then you're going to get something magnetic to catch those valve spring retainers. Pull those out, and the air should hold the valve up for you, and you should be able to pull the spring off. Then you're going to want to move this out of the way, and you can pull the spring off, and then get like a flathead screwdriver is all I use to pop the seal off. Get up underneath it and just pop it off. It's not hard. It'll come off relatively easily. When you go to put your new seal on, you're going to put some oil or some sort of assembly lubricant on it when you go to push it down on there, otherwise it's not going to want to seat properly. And then after you put that on there, we'll show you there's this little O-ring, and we'll show this in the video. We can't show this until we take the valve spring off. There's a little O-ring that goes below the valve spring retainer. Now on some V8 engines they don't have this, on mine it does, on my LS it doesn't. And this is to help oil not drip down your valve stem and helps control oil with the problem that we're having with this engine. So if you have those, put them on. I was told by Cylinder Shop sometimes they don't even put them on the engines even if there's a place for them. That's just a one way or another type thing. One thing too you're going to want to do if I was doing this and I have this is have extra valve spring retainer pieces, have extra valve seals, because the chances of you losing one is very, very, very high. I've already lost 3 doing this. Now you want to make sure they don't fall in the engine. You want to make sure they fall on the ground. The ones I know where they are, there's underneath the car, and I'm not going to go down and get them because I have extra ones. I'd recommend you get extra ones because you never know where they're going to go. Another thing too is if you have really, really, really heavy springs, like on some sort of street engine has a cam in or something like that, I would not recommend using this particular valve spring compressor because it puts a lot of lateral force on the stud, and unless you have like a really big stud or a nice stud, I would be worried about it breaking the stud off. This engine is not too bad because it's got stock valve springs, but I would use one of the screw down types like I have for my LS to do what I'm doing right now if I was to do this on a modified engine. But it's nothing too complicated. Just keep track of what you're doing because you got to do all this stuff 16 times. We gotta do is put on the valve covers. One thing about small block Chevy valve covers that'll save you a lot of pain is putting studs instead of doing screws. 2 reasons for that is, one, it's easier to get the gasket aligned on here, because if you're trying to have the gasket be on the valve cover and you're trying to lower it in here and then it slides, it's a pain in the butt. So it's easier just to put the studs on here. Also, I would highly recommend these silicone gaskets. They're just a lot nicer and they're reusable, so if you end up having to take your valve cover off again, which if you have a small block Chevy, you probably will, more than 5 or 20 or 40 times, and that makes it not cost as much. You only have to change it every probably 10 or 15 times you take it off. I mean, this one I've had off 5 or 6 times since I bought it, and there's not really any issues. But other than that, it's nothing too crazy. I mean, this one's kind of interesting to get in there because you got to snake it underneath this fuel line over here, and get it around this hose, which I should have made longer when I first put it on here. But
you can just take it off too if you want, but if you can get it on, which you can get it on without taking it off, might as well.
And one other thing too, we know there's a coolant leak here. Don't try and tell us that it's all effed up. We know it is effed up. We got to fix it later. Right now we're just focusing on one thing at a time. But that is going to be something we fix in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
We grab the valve cover.
Yep. Okay, go.
Okay. This is probably not the way they recommend it in the manual. There we go. And, you know, how I said the studs make it easier? Well, studs make that particular part a little bit harder, but makes getting the gasket actually in the right spot easier, which is the main thing. Another cool thing about the studs, or something you need to know about the studs, I guess, is I would put Loctite when you screw the studs themselves in between the studs and the cylinder heads, because if you have nylock nuts like these come with, which is really what you need, sometimes the nuts will just pull the stud out of the cylinder head, and rather than the stud coming off of the nut. So that's just something that makes it go a little easier for you.
Seems like it's not focusing. I don't think it's focusing on what I want it to focus on. There's a better way of putting that.
Can't wait for us to put this all back together, and then the valves to be out of adjustment, and you have to take it all back apart and readjust them.
You're so positive when we do stuff like this.
It's the best part about working on it.
Yeah.
Just take it all back apart. Oh, and the other thing too, works really good is if you have the right size socket.
Yeah, if it's too small, it doesn't do anything.
It's too big, yeah.
That too. Let's see if it'll focus. There we go.
Also have the cat trying to talk to us.
Let's get checkers in. This is our shop cat. Okie dokie.
Okay, just put on the air filter. Make sure you cut yourself on the cut you already have with the really sharp metal right there. That's key.
Means it's on good enough.
Yeah. And have a lot of trouble putting the wing nut on. If you don't do that, you're just not doing it right. Here's one of them. Also, your thingy shouldn't look like that.
Slight vacuum leak.
Not a vacuum leak, more just like hot air straight into your intake, and that's the only good thing about these two snorkel intakes is that they let somewhat cold air in. I mean, to be honest, these really aren't that bad. People like to dog them, but they're just a factory cold air intake is what they really are. They don't look that good, but it works a hell of a lot better than just putting a filter on the top of it.
Did you already put the spark plugs in? Yep.
Yep. Spark plugs are in. Everything's in. I need to put this back in.
Okay.
Forever.
Yep.
How long until you start your car? 30 minutes. I'll tell you what, you want to move my mom's car?